Good morning. This is a big welcome for the Clark County Council time, 9 a.m. Wednesday, February 16, 2022. We will get underway with old business, and there are just two items under old business. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes of February 9?
Move to approve.
Second?
I wasn't in attendance. I never understood why I couldn't vote. I mean, I did read through the minutes. They look good, but I didn't. I wasn't
I'll
present.
second them. How's that, Counselor?
I actually think you can. I think you can vote, Councilor Medvigi. I think it's appropriate that you could. I think I've seen that in other jurisdictions where you can vote on the minutes if you've watched them and reviewed them.
Yes, that's my understanding as well, Councilor Medvigi.
So now we will vote.
Different boards and committees treat it differently, but I'm happy to vote on it. I did read them and they looked in proper order.
So we shall now get your vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So the motion is carried. Body cameras. Kathleen Otto.
Yes, actually, Chair, at this time, I would like to ask that we rearrange the agenda for a few items to have action items first to ensure that we have a quorum to approve those. So then if I may, the next agenda item that I would request is that we discuss the work session request, which is number 4.1 on the agenda.
And then from the work session, we go to body cameras.
After the work session, I would actually ask to amend the agenda again to add a request from the auditor's office regarding a special meeting for a public hearing for precinct boundary changes. And then we would go into body cameras.
Very good. So we're now with the work session request, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan and Capital Plan Review.
Yes, so again, good morning, councilors. This request is from Public Works. They're requesting a work session next week for about an hour. This is the Parks and Recreation and Open Space Plan provides the direction and priorities for the park system here in Clark County. This plan is required to be updated every 6 years to maintain eligibility with grant funding. And they are ready to review the final draft pros plan in preparation for the council's hearing and I think in the next month, and seek the council's feedback and input and direction prior to that public hearing.
Are there any questions? I just have a couple. One is just a comment, I guess. I noticed that the 6-year mark has passed for the approval of that report. So it is important, I would assume, that we take that up immediately. So your timing there looks appropriate. I think the 6-year mark would have been September 22, 2021, I believe. Then the other thing I noticed, it said in the plan that the final pros plan is attached. I did not find that, so I presume we'll be getting that later.
Yes, that will be attached to the actual work session that will be held next week, but it'll be online prior.
Very good. And it said consultant services are needed to meet requirements of the plan update. Is that already finished?
Well, I believe so, because they do have the draft plan. They have been working on this plan for quite some time. So while the, like as you mentioned, the 6-year plan has not been completed, but they had started work already. So I believe they have been working with the consultant. I think the council actually has been updated a couple of times on this plan. So this is really the first final draft report for your consideration and feedback.
Any other questions or comments? No? Is there a motion for approval of the work session request?
Yeah, I'm good. So moved.
Second? Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion is passed. And now we move to the special request, Kathleen.
So Just for the record, this would be an addition to what's on the agenda today. So just for minutes purposes, this would be item number 2.4 under new business. Greg Kimsey, the Clark County Auditor, has reached out. Annually, they do precinct boundary updates based on population. This year, there was also an update based on state legislation. Due to elections and timing, him and his staff would greatly appreciate the council doing a special public hearing to address this. This does not impact councilor districts or the redistricting process. This is an annual process that they normally go through in addition to the state one. The date that they are looking at is March 8th. So this would be noticed as a special meeting and also a public hearing. I will note the afternoon already is blocked on councilors' calendars for potential council retreat for the second day. So I would recommend the council consider this public hearing, and we can put it at 1 o'clock on that date. That's already blocked on your calendars.
Questions? Comments? Why is it again that he would like to have this considered early?
Just make sure I understand your question. Are you asking why he would like to have this on March 8th?
Yes.
So because election filing for the primary and other elections, they need to get stuff out sooner than later. And this could, once the filing starts, they cannot make any changes or do anything at that time. So it's really in line with the elections process to ensure that things are taken care of prior to filings.
And he said that it would not, the precinct changes, which sometimes affect maps. He said that this time it will not affect the possible councilor redistricting maps.
He did say that it does not change the council district boundaries. It's like I said, it's an annual process that sometimes the precinct boundaries may change a little bit. And I know there's a possibility that Councilor O'Brien will be retired by then, and I anticipate if that is the case, that council will also have appointed potentially that replacement prior to this hearing.
Further questions? What are your thoughts about doing this on the 8th, which was the second day reserved for the retreat, correct? What are your thoughts about that? Any questions, thoughts?
I think it works for me. I have no objection.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to accept, I don't know what much it could be. Move to accept the request for a March 8th special meeting for precinct boundary review.
Second?
I'll go ahead and second it. I do have some comments on a related matter, but that can wait.
It can wait, okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion is passed. And now we move to body cameras, 1.2 under old business.
So thank you, Council. So excuse me, a couple of the items that we have on today is really about process. We don't need any formal direction today, but just wanted to get it in front of you. If we have an opportunity to make some decisions, that would be great. I also want to say for the community members, some of the items that are going to be discussed or shared this morning, this presentation that staff just pulled up is a presentation that Mark Gassaway did prior in a prior council meeting with the council. I do have some talking points, if staff could bring that up as well on a Word document, and I will have staff put those out online. This was certainly not an intention to not be transparent. It really is my thought process, and so I did want to make sure that the public knew that while this wasn't uploaded prior, I was finalizing stuff last night, but we will put this on there. So just to make sure that we're not losing the conversation on body cameras, The last time the council spoke on this was in December. Mark did provide that presentation that shared what the different taxes again, options, and also what the dollar amounts could be. This is just again, the RCW regarding ballot options does say that the county legislative authority may submit an authorizing proposition to the county voters at a primary or general election. So if this is for like the public safety sales tax option that we were talking about previously. So if you do the primary election as an option, and that is in August of this year, August 2nd, the general election is in November. In order to meet the August deadline, we would have to have all the documents, including the resolution, explanatory statements, and the for and against statements to the elections office by May 13th. And the general election would be by August 2nd. Just some considerations for the council. I would recommend that we look at public outreach efforts to the extent that we're permitted, because I know some of the things that we put out there may be restrictive. Looking at our partners, both internally with the county, with our law and justice partners, as well as the cities on that public outreach. And then, as you know, we are working through a jail process right now, and that is another consideration just for the council to keep in the back of your mind that, maybe there's an opportunity to combine this with that, or maybe it makes sense to do it differently. So I wanted to put those pieces out there for options as well. Again, what I would like to do, based on council's feedback, is start having staff start drafting the documents needed. I didn't hear any opposition for the ballot options in prior conversations, but there certainly wasn't yes, let's move forward with it. So my intention is, again, to make sure this is continuing this conversation, start drafting the documents if council's still supportive of looking at this option. And then we can bring back some of the public outreach opportunities as well in the future. There was also a follow-up on the last question or the last meeting where what could be used with that tax, and Mark Esway did send out a message that was in this RCW and from MRSC on what the public safety sales tax could be used for, and definitely body cameras was one of those options. So right now, is there any questions from the council?
I don't have questions, but I do have comments, Madam Chair. So I read through your lips, even though I couldn't hear you. We're going to have to work on that voice-activated mute button for you. So if I may, just a few minutes, because I want to make this clear publicly. I mean, it comes in dribs and drabs. I've been very supportive of body cameras for the last couple of years. We're really behind the time in modern policing that we don't have this here in Clark County. Every law enforcement agency in the county fully supports it. The PA fully supports it. Pretty much no one is objecting to it. Now, we had a failed ballot measure last time, and you could put whatever reason to it for its failure, but we'll never really know until we tee up another one. Certainly, people could have just voted against it because they were totally confused. Or they voted against it because they don't want any new taxes. Or they want to defund the police, not fund them. And that's the danger with the jails. Everyone wants a safe and healthy jail, but there's a lot of people that don't want the jail increased. In fact, that was one of the oppositions to the ballot measure we had. So there's a danger but we need to be open and honest in what we hope to use this additional tax money for if the public votes for it. I'm not in favor of raising taxes, but I'm certainly in favor of allowing the public to make that decision. So I would like to get this on at the earliest possible ballot measure. I think we need to be very direct in saying what this money will be used for, and hopefully people will actually read the pamphlet this time and understand what it is. But the bottom line is we need to fund this. We have ARPA money, we've got unprecedented sales tax money coming in, And if we need to cut someone else's budget or a general budget to make this funded, then we should do so. And that's certainly up to the executive branch to find that money. We had one counselor, when I brought this up at one other point, basically say, well, pick the account you want to decrement. And, it's not for me to take darts and throw it at a dartboard when we have hundreds of lines of revenue and expenditures. And we could make a blanket, hey, we're going to cut everybody's department by 1% to pay for body cameras. But that's not the way to do business. So my druthers all along would be to find the money in the budget to pay for this program in the most cost-efficient way that we can. Obviously, a ballot measure to increase taxes to pay for this law and justice kind of funding will go a long way. We'll be sharing it with the cities, and it'll help them considerably as well. We need broad support by all the chiefs, the sheriff, each of the city councils. The public has to understand that we do have needs to remodel the jail and build some new modules, some new aspects to it. We need to fund on a sustainable basis body cameras. So it's very justified that we raise this issue of needing the 10th or whatever we decide on for increased sales tax to pay for all these programs. So we need to be continually moving forward on this, and one way or the other, we need to find the money to pay for the body cam program. Thank you.
Chair Bowerman, you're muted.
Thank you. My dog has been going crazy, so I'm sorry. Any comments, Councilor Olson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, I agree with Councilor Medved. This is a priority. It has been a priority, I think, for this council. Having run campaigns over the last 20 years, whether they're political campaigns or campaigns for bond measures for schools, when we're asking our public to contribute to whatever the project is, whether it's a new school, a levy, body cameras, we have to be really direct and really clear. And I think whether that was the issue with the measure last time, this is the right way to go in terms of the public safety sales tax, in my view. And having the cities on board, having our community on board, we do have to be aware, but we have to understand that we will be running a campaign, whether it's us directly or having a campaign committee. This is a campaign. We need to get everybody on board to support this initiative. And I think I agree the sooner rather than later is in the best interest of law enforcement. I just want to make sure that we don't rush it so that we can make sure we get enough information out to the public, that we do have the right public outreach, that we get campaign committees on board, we get people knocking on doors and supporting this initiative or this this ballot measure, because that's what it's going to take. And I do think we have this community behind an effort for body cameras and public safety. And I do think we can get our cities, and to your point, Councilor Medved, our police chiefs and law enforcement officers around the community and around the county supportive of this measure. So I just think we need to be really aware of the process we take to get it on the ballot, when we get on the ballot, and what steps can we do to make sure everybody's on board and all rowing the boat together. But yeah, so I'm all in favor, and I think just considering a timeline, I think Councilor or Kathleen, you'd mentioned sort of public outreach process. I'd be curious about what that looks like, and what the steps to lay out a process might be. But I know you have some dates here, but the campaign part is what's going to be critical, getting to our community.
Just a comment on your insight there. I agree about the timing that is needed for a campaign, as you very aptly label it. Therefore, I do have some concerns about the primary election as the vehicle for getting this out there. That will be up on us before we know it. The general would give us a little bit more time, but I have a couple of other views that I'd like to share. there may be just concerns. One is the state legislature is, as far as I know, still considering the body cam initiative at the state level, and we'll soon know what the outcome of that is, and that may very well inform either how much funding we would need at the county level, or just how we would need to go about it in terms of the actual equipment itself and so on. The second thing is we will probably also have the jail initiative going forward at about the time of at least the general election. And I have some concern with doing what I call a 1-2 with the public, because it's hard, I think, to clearly communicate what we're doing unless we combine the efforts in some appropriate way, because even if it's just combined in terms of timing, so that we can explain if this much of the money is for body cams and this much is for jails, that the public knows exactly what they're voting on and what they're voting for. That will be a challenge if there are multiple financial mechanisms going forward for the jail at about that time. So it's my concern is just that be very carefully coordinated.
Chair, Kathleen,
Yes.
And I suspect we can look at this in more detail as we go forward. That the public safety sales tax can be used for jail and law enforcement type functions. That's correct. So just a matter of relooking at the dollars again, considering our sales tax base continues to increase. I'd be curious about relooking at the actual numbers of what this particular measure might generate, and just kind of getting some real sense of dollars and cents.
So we can certainly, if you want, bring that up now. I know Mark Gasway is on here as well, and his numbers, Mark, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but that was shared in December, did incorporate the increased number in the sales tax. Or we can wait and have that conversation further next week if you'd like.
Correct. If we want to bring up that presentation, it will show you the most recent updated numbers for both the public safety sales tax and the detention sales tax. So, yeah.
I would like to go into it now, Madam Chair. They're so related between ARPA funding and sales tax and what we may have available for revenue, not only for jail remodel projects, but making correction staff and deputy staffing whole. The public is starting to reach out and understand that crime is rampant. And if we don't fund our sheriff's department properly, sufficiently, we're not going to be able to keep on top of that. So it's not just increasing jail capacity. This is a broad brush, overarching view at public safety. So I would like to hear Mark's presentation.
And if I can, Chair, also just before Mark gets started, just as a reminder to the council, and I did hear some mention of, the support of going out to the voters, but also looking internally at our departments and our funding. ARPA does create one-time funding. We need to look at this as an ongoing. Hopefully our sales tax will continue to increase. But also a reminder, and this is a really hard reality that I don't want to lose sight of, but general fund is, we have a lot of restricted funds that cannot be used specifically for jail or public safety. And the fund that can be used is our general fund. Over 75% of that fund is already in law and justice. So in order to look internally, I don't think you're going to be able to find enough reductions in non-law and justice departments to support this ongoing. So what that could look like, if we don't have any external revenue, is that we're having to cut in law and justice in order to fund these ongoing programs. So I just didn't want anybody to lose sight of that in the back of your mind. It's a hard pill to swallow, and it's really unfortunate, but that is our reality in the budget right now. So with that said, Mark, go ahead.
And Mark, I'm going to interrupt you too. I'm sorry. One of the things that I think when we get your more final report will be, or should it include, I think, the real number of additional employees that are needed in order to have body cams. It probably was overestimated in the first round. I don't know that to be the case for sure, but looking at some of the other cities' data that and counties' data that you produced, it did appear that way. The other thing is, I have heard that there are some instances when if you buy from X vendor for body cams, you will also get the updates technologically that come about, which would reduce a significant amount of some of that ongoing cost. I don't know that that's been investigated at this point. And whoever would do that, I think that would need to be done before we look at final numbers too. So those are a couple of thoughts.
All right, let's just go and just kind of review this real quickly. The public safety sales tax, you can request that this be implemented into in tenths up to 3/10. So 1/10, 2/10, or 3/10. Each tenth countywide currently would provide about $12 million. So this particular sales tax is a split sales tax. 60% of that, or 7.2 million, would go to the county, and 40%, or 4.8 million, would go to the cities. So if you go to the next slide, it'll show that split. Yeah, so here's the split for each tenth. So any questions up to this point? It's really a pretty basic.
So the question I have right away, based on when you said 0.3, the cities can't then add their own. Are there any cities right now that have implemented
no
a tenth? No. So okay.
No. And if the county implements first, then this would be the split. If a city were to implement first, it's a different calculation. So, and if you go to the next slide, I think it even shows that. Yeah, this is a example of how this tax works. It's an additive tax. So if the county were to implement the first tenth, the diagram on the left would show how that tenth would be split. And then on the right, if a city were to implement subsequently, it would only be the amount of sales tax collected within the city limits. So this is just using an example. If the city limits, within that city limits, if it generated 6 million, that would be the split. We would still get a portion of it, but a much smaller portion. So. Okay, questions on that one? Okay, this is the same, a different example. If a city were to implement first, they would retain the portion that's within the city, and then the county would only get a portion of the unincorporated. However, that part would always be split 60-40, so we would only receive about 3.6 million of that unincorporated portion. So the advantage would be, of course, to implement first, if this is your choice. Once the county has made that decision, then the cities would have to do a subsequent implementation. Okay, and I think there's one more example. If you go forward one more slide. Yeah, this is a simultaneous implementation. So it's basically the the unincorporated gets split 60-40, the incorporated gets split 15-85. So
Madam Chair, if I just broadly speaking, what's the right and left margins of any restrictions on use of that sales tax?
public safety sales tax is very broad. It can be used for law enforcement. It can be used for public safety, also includes fire. So the cities which have their own fire department could use it for fire district support. It can be used for the support of law and justice, for example, operations of jails, for courts. It's very broad.
Mark, I've got a follow-up question on that, if I might. I'm sorry. So I'm just throwing this out because I'm thinking about it as we're having this conversation. I know we haven't recently had specific discussions about what a jail remodel might look like or what a new jail. I mean, we haven't really talked about that recently. But could a portion of the sales tax be used to pay for a bond? So if the county decided we were going to bond for a new jail or jail improvements, could the sales tax generated here be used to make those bond payments?
Yes.
Okay.
If you go to the next slide, that if you were to go down that road, Councilor Olson, you might want to consider this, because this would be specifically used for a jail. I understand.
I don't want to, we already went down this road,
Yeah.
Mark. I don't want to go down this road again.
Yeah, if you were going just for the jail though, just for a jail bond, this might be a different route. It just depends on what the council decides. So next slide, real quickly. So again, it's the same countywide sales tax, 1/10. However, in this case, the full 12 million would go to the county. So, and there's no sharing requirement. And I think there's only one slide left. I think that's it. Yep. That's it.
Mark, if we were doing the public safety sales tax and a significant portion of the funds went to the cities, what communication requirements could we put on the cities so that voters would know how their funds are going to be used?
You could ask the cities nicely if they would like to share that information. There's no requirement that the county could put on the cities for the use of their funding.
And not for the use of their funding, but for telling the voters how it would be used by the cities.
Yeah, that would be, I think if you were to do a collaborative campaign, that would be part of that discussion, right? How they want to communicate that message.
No requirement. It's a function of our mutual relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And Chair Barman, I am optimistic that, just from my conversations with the cities on different levels, as you guys have mentioned, everybody supports law and justice in our community and police and body cameras. So I am hopeful that the cities would coordinate with us during a campaign and public information outreach program.
Mm-hmm.
Does support everybody in this community. So I am optimistic that they would work with us and have a united, and maybe, like you said, maybe they can share specifically how it will be spent in their cities, but we can incorporate that in the information.
If they would, I think it would stand a much better chance of passage, because voters would want to know, is this money going for fire or for the county jail from the city, or is it going to be used in the city in a different way yet for public safety? They'll want to know.
And
if I may, I'd like to chime in, Mark, on this strategy here. The in my conversations so far, and I have been very recently talking about the jail remodel with other electeds, and there is broad support, but one strategy there could be would be to have a presentation at each of the city council meetings, to have them join in with us. And so that would be a public meeting where I think the council would be somewhat urged to discuss how they would use their 40% split. I think that whether it's Mark or us or the county manager doing a presentation or other staff, I think it would be a part of a narrative, a part of a strategy to roll this out very quickly, whether we take it to the August or general primary in November. I think that's one aspect of how we can publicly reach out to our city councils.
I was just going to comment, the amount that this sales tax would generate, even, sorry, not this one, but the public safety sales tax is clearly going to be more than the annual cost of the body cams itself. I believe that the annual cost was around $2 million a year. And so if the county is receiving 7 million, then of course there's that conversation of, is this going to be set aside in a sinking fund? Will the tax be limited to a certain amount of time so that you can end it at some point, or are you planning on using that excess for other purposes? So there's really a larger conversation with just implementing the 1/10, right?
Are there other questions for Mark? Comments? Anything else that we should add, Kathleen?
I guess, am I hearing that the council is more interested or leaning towards a November ballot versus August? think
I
that's-
am.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm the one absent vote because I want to get this on the ballot as soon as possible. And I'm not so sure it's a good strategy to have both jail bond issues and the sales tax issue talk together for the public. I mean, there's just so much the public can digest at one time. And we've been sitting on everybody's pushing for the body cameras and have been for the last couple of years pretty hard. So I would like it on the earliest possible movement, and to move on this quickly to get this socialized with the city councils. But I understand I'm only in the minority here.
Chair,
Yes.
we don't have to decide today in terms of when we put it on the ballot, but some other things to consider. I think if we're looking at a public safety sales tax, that's what it is. Certainly body cameras are a priority there. But if we're going to have a jail conversation and we can use the sales tax revenue, excess sales tax revenues for a potential bond payment, that is a separate conversation, but it's still one public safety sales tax. So I think we just need to make sure we get our messaging really, really clear. So the only other thing to consider in terms of a November election is, tax measures tend to not always do so well in a November election. That's just something to consider in terms of strategy and a campaign in terms of doing our best to get it passed. So I don't know that we have to make a decision today on that. We can maybe just sit on it for a week and think about process.
Mark, do you know of other financial issues or bonds or anything like that that will be on the November ballot or in the primary for that matter?
As of right now, I'm
Yes.
not aware of any.
Of course, the schools that lost in the last election are going to probably prop theirs up again. I think we can anticipate either one. And I really do believe that Julie hit on a very important point, because even though participation is a lot higher in the November ballot, then that tends to bring out more opposition to tax measures. There is more of a likelihood of squeaking it by during the primary.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention, I believe the schools could, if they elected to come back in April, but there's not been any determination from the school districts at this point.
Yeah, and just to add one more comment on that, I do remember when I was on the school board, we really did try to avoid November general elections for bonds. We tried to avoid that.
So if it's okay with council, I'll come up with a proposed process with dates with both the primary and the November so that you can see how that would work either way. I will reach out to the city managers as well, and I would encourage you all to reach out to your counterparts and the legislative bodies of the cities as well to have just a conversation of, you know, asking for support and asking for a collaborative approach and showing the benefits of the county. And I always want to be mindful of, you know, as Mark has mentioned, we can't tell the cities what to do. We can't tell them how to spend their money. But I think we can certainly capitalize through our relationships with the cities to work together to get that message out. So I'll do some conversations there. I'll talk to our communication staff as well and come back next week with a suggested or some options for you with regards to process and some ideas, and we can continue the conversation.
Kathleen, knowing that you are chairing the jail effort and getting the committee in gear very soon again, what is the timeline that you envision for knowing what the funding needs would be? At one time, that was March 31.
It's probably going to be the middle of April.
Middle of April?
At the earliest, yes.
Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be until then, for sure, that we would see just how these two projects of the body cam and the jail intersect if we use the public safety sales tax.
Well, if we get some good numbers, we'll be able to, that will still be hopefully before the primary deadline, if the council wanted to put anything forward with regards to the jail as well. So that, and I'll have to, and the one thing I don't know and I have not looked at is the bond, and maybe Mark knows, is there any restrictions on when that is going out? Because what was presented today is actually for the public safety sales tax measures. So I'd have to look at and work with legal and the RCW on that. So I'll take that into consideration as well and try and incorporate it into the same process for both public outreach, coordination with cities, because they certainly also have an important voice when it comes to our jail, because they are, you know, our #1 customers in the jail. So I'll coordinate both of those processes into one for you.
And Madam Chair, Kathleen, I know your time is precious and you're only one deep. And so enlarging the message and looking for audiences are an important thing. That's why I brought up the issue of doing a presentation at the city councils. But the other thought that came up to me just as you were speaking, you know, the mayors, and I don't know how often they regularly meet, but certainly, and I've, through the mayor of Vancouver, done some communication with the other mayors in that way. I mean, can you do a presentation? Could one of us, together with Mark, at one of the mayors' meetings? Because that's kind of a segue preliminarily into the councils of all the cities. And it may, I don't know how often they meet, but that may be something to do right away as well to kind of begin the narration.
They do have a standing meeting. I think that, and I'll think about what you're proposing and take that into consideration. How I think it might work a little bit better too, or an option to consider is, again, have those informal conversations first. And then what would be really impactful is if, and I don't know if we can do this, but is have a public forum where all of us are presenting the benefits of this, the cities and the county together. So it's not the county trying to strong arm or have that appearance of saying, please do this. It's like, let's build that relationship now. Let's work together now. And maybe from those conversations, we can collaboratively stand together as one in a public and maybe multiple public meetings where we're presenting the importance, the funding, what are we going to spend it on? I think that would be really important for our community, just as an option or a suggestion. So, but we can, we've got some good staff. Johnny and Lee, I know, are on, I think, right now with our communications team, and of course, Mark with the finance team. So let us put our heads together and see what we can do. But regardless, I'm still going to call my counterparts at the cities, because I do have a really good relationship with all of them, and I value their input and feedback, and I'm hopeful to have that support, and they've always offered to support as well. So I think, if you're having those connections with your counterparts at the cities, maybe that could be part of the message, is how can we do this together? Because that does speak volumes and show that support.
And if I may, I'm sorry, but one more point I want to make in light of what Councilor Olson's point was earlier, and I take for granted that this is a campaign. I mean, it absolutely is, and we didn't do it last time, and we had a fractured council to begin with. So that's a really poor message to the public in general, that we had dissent on the council. So I'm hopeful that we can all come together collegially and decide on which way to go forward. And whether it's 4 or 5 members of this council in the future, we really need to be unified in a position on this. And even if you have a minority or difference of opinion, that you then come around and join the majority to have a single position, because otherwise we'll fail in that campaign.
Anything else for the good of this discussion? I think it's been an important one, so we can take this forward, because like we were saying earlier, that May 13 deadline for the August primary will be here before we know it. So we don't have much time to get things in place if that's when we want to put this on the ballot. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your insight and input as always. How about if we move on now to new business? And we'll start with the proclamation request for Red Cross Month in March. And I've seen on my emails also a request for National Therapy Animal Day. I don't know if you are going to discuss that as well, Kathleen.
Actually, we'll put that one on next week's agenda, just so that we get it on the agenda and the public has an opportunity to see that as well.
Okay.
I'm not familiar where this one came from. I think it's the same one, and Lindsay might know, but I believe it's the same one that we've done historically during this month. But Lindsay, do you have any additional information on this?
Yes, it is. We've done this one historically, and just wanted to bring it forward to the council to make sure that you're okay to move this forward to one of our meetings in March. Happy to answer any questions about it, though.
I'm certainly supportive. Is there any objection?
Yeah, I am as well, and I do have comments on other potential resolutions as well as the service dog. I don't know if or service animal. I don't know if everyone had received that or it just came to my box, but
I believe all the councilors received it, but it will be on next week's council time agenda for your consideration.
okay. So I don't want to be out of order with this, but I did want, this was one of the related topics I wanted to bring up because, and I was gone a week, so I don't know if there was further discussion, but we had a resolution regarding the Board of Health come from a nurse organization, basically to solidify and publicly state what our position was regarding best practices during the pandemic. And I thought it was a good resolution, and I pushed it forward to Lindsay, and hopeful that other counselors would join in and we could get that published sometime before the pandemic is over. And then on a related note, I thought the mini initiative was a poor direction, but to pass an ordinance, to pass law in contravention of other laws, that's not what we should do. But we just had a recent example by Rydell, the superintendent of schools, that somewhat joined in asking the governor to release these mandates once conditions allowed. But most importantly, and a position I think we have taken all along is we want local authority. We want our local boards of health to have some input, to have some decision-making authority. And now would be a good time for a resolution. It could be a single resolution promoting best practices, but also, hey, let's get out from under these mandates and let's get back to local control, and let's put the local boards of health to proper use once again, because pretty soon we're going to have all that and never have raised our voice at all.
Councillor Olson, have you seen the proclamation or whatever it is from the nursing group?
I don't believe I have.
I don't believe I have either. So if there's interest in that, I would say it needs to be circulated. So I think we're ready to move on unless there are other comments on the Red Cross Month proclamation.
Okay. Well, I had asked in light of my comments in that discussion, because I had no idea, no one else had seen this. Lindsay, if you could send that proposed resolution out to everyone so that people have visibility of it.
Was that a yes?
Yes. Sorry, I shook my head. Yes.
Very good. So next we move to 2.2 under new business, the Ethics Commission. Kathleen?
Yes, so staff, if you could pull up the Word document. So this is just a proposed outline of a process for us to get moving on the Code of Ethics Ordinance and the Ethics Review and Oversight Office that was approved in the November election that was on as part of a charter amendment. So the first part is the Code of Ethics that you can see on there. Section 8.12 of the charter is the new language that says on or before July 31st, the County Council shall adopt an ordinance establishing a code of ethics and establish penalties for the violation of this code. The ethics code must be adhered to by all departments and entities that receive funding through the county budget and all officials elected or appointed to administer county government. So, there is some reasoning behind my dates. I always like work backwards and stuff. So again, this is a discussion document just for me to outline my process and to have council feedback. So the process for this is suggest that staff draft an ethics ordinance for council's review for next Wednesday. There has been a lot of work already done on ethics with regards to the rules of procedure conversations, as well as there is state law regarding ethics in government. So I think it's not a stretch for staff to incorporate what's already been discussed and what's already been established and put it into an ordinance for your review next week. If for some reason we need another week because there's some suggested edits, the following week we would also hold that if needed for another review. Once that is done on March 2nd, pending that the council has reviewed and agreed, then we would send out a public hearing notice for that, for a public hearing to be on April 5th. Again, those dates can be moved. One of the reasons why I'm recommending an April 5th date versus the March 15th is we have several hearings already scheduled for March 15th. We have 4 or 5. So I want to be mindful of council's time as well, and we do have a little time on this. Staff, if you could scroll down just a little bit. So on the number 2, this is the Ethics Review and Oversight Office. So basically it's saying, on or before July 31st, the county manager in conjunction with the county council and as per section 3.8B of this charter, which I do have that language below, shall appoint an ethics review commission comprised of qualified individuals in the area of ethical conduct in government. So I won't read the rest of that, but it's basically having a commission that's going to oversee this. In addition to that, we will have staff support to that commission like we do with other commissions. We have to have a dedicated phone line for community members to call in for any concerns, ethic concerns. This commission will accept and investigate any potential ethics complaint and provide staff support to the Ethics Review Commission. Again, So if you go down for the process, on the March 2nd, which would be when we're sending out the public hearing notice. So our code of ethics has already been established and ready for a public hearing. So that's, I don't want to have this commission start, but not have an ordinance yet to guide their work moving forward. So at council time, we'll have a draft news release seeking volunteers for this ethics review commission on March 2nd and send it out that afternoon upon council approval. We'll give them until the 25th to supply their applications. On the 30th, it'll be decided who will be interviewed. The interviews will be on the 6th. Again, the 6th is going to be the day after the public hearing. So again, we're kind of doing both processes simultaneously, but making sure that the important pieces are done before moving forward. The April 19th, the commission appoints, or the commission is appointed in accordance with the section 3.3 of the charter, which I have below. And then the 20th, and the April 19th, I believe, is the council meeting. I'll have to double check on that date, but I believe it's the council meeting. So just like all of our other appointments happen during consent on council meetings. April 20th, I say council or the commission draft bylaws, and then those would be complete by May 6th. Many of our commissions have bylaws. That's going to determine how they're governed, how many times they meet, what's their lens, just all, and we have sample bylaws that we can help, staff can help as well with this commission. And then on May 10th, the ethics complaint hotline will be published, and that would be within a news release, the county website, and so forth. So that way the commission has, again, the final ordinance, hopefully that has been adopted by the council. The commission has been selected. They go through the process to establish their bylaws and how they're going to operate. We have the phone line set up, and then we're hitting the ground running on May 10th. Again, these don't have to be in effect until July 31st, but I think we can reasonably do this in this time frame and get this done and moving forward so our community has this additional resource. Do you have any questions or feedback on this process?
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Kathleen, I just want to get some clarification on the process based on section 3.3B. So this is an appointment that you make, correct? Similar to other appointments that you make. I just want to, when you have like March 30th, decide who will be interviewed, that's your decision. That's not something that the council is involved in at that point based on appointments by the county manager.
I would agree with that based on section 3.3. However, the new ethics review commission on 8.13, it says the county manager in conjunction with the county council and as per section 3.3B. So because it's in conjunction with the council, I would, and I can talk to legal about this a little bit more, that, having, a counselor or all the counselors part of the interview process or something, what's that line between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think in conjunction with, I think section 3.3B allows that because we can reject your appointment at the end of the process if we don't like who it is. And maybe Leslie can spend a little time on this. It just seems to me like this is a county manager appointment based on 3.3B. And I think just from a general process perspective, the counselor's appointing the ethics commission. Not that it would, but it could look like, they're appointing people that would be in their own best interest. I'm not saying that would happen, but there's a perception potentially of that. And so maybe we can just get a little clarification on that piece.
Thank you, Counselor.
Question, Kathleen, is there any part of what is proposed here that is beyond what is required by the charter amendment?
No.
No.
Unless, based on Counselor Olson's, just her question that she just asked and clarification. Other than that, no, this is in compliance with what the charter amendment is requiring the council to do. Yes.
The reason I ask that, I've seen other ethics commissions in operation in other parts of the country, and something to be very cautious of is that it is not presented as a way to drum up business. some of them are as if they are seeking reports to be made so that they've got something to look at and some business to take care of. And that's not what this is all about or what it should be all about. And there's a very fine line there that we have to be very careful that the purpose of the hotline is really understood, and that the commissioners understand that their role is not to try to find actively ethics violations. That's just not what it's all about. And let's just be really cautious when we go forward, because this is a very aggressive ethics commission approach.
Yeah, and I think the ordinance that goes before the council defines what, what's required, what's expected, and that is going to guide the ethics commission. So if people are, and I know sometimes there's confusion, with a lot of people, both internally and externally, between ethics and professional conduct. Somebody being rude and disrespectful and not being kind is not necessarily ethics. There is a legal reason behind ethics regarding using your position for personal gain or whatever. So I think, that's why that ordinance has to be very clear on what is ethics. And we have that clarity in law. And we've already been working on that, like I said, in the rules of procedure. And so when the commission is appointed and they're drafting their bylaws, that's going to be their guidepost. They're going to have to ask the question, does this violate any one of these things in the ordinance? Because, we can't, I think the intent of this was to provide an avenue for anybody in our community to put forward a concern to be looked at. And I would think that if they got something that wasn't ethics as defined by law and as defined by the ordinance, then there's no more action. They would say it does not meet these criteria because it's, it's just unprofessional conduct. So I hear your feedback, and we'll certainly make sure that the clarity in the ordinance and with the commission is clear as we move forward with this process.
And the person who's running the hotline, that is a key area for training.
Yeah, well, how I'm envisioning that is that we'll have a dedicated line, but and staff will check it maybe daily for voicemail. I don't see a lot of people calling it. Maybe they will. I mean, maybe they know things and they don't have a safe avenue to move forward right now, but I'm not hiring staff for this. This is not a full-time permanent position. This is similar to staff supporting commission with aging or others. So it's a very part-time as needed. It is not a full-time staff member. This is really just, monitoring the line. If they get something, they're going to be sending it to the commission. Commission will determine, does it fall within these parameters, and then be done or move forward with the process.
Madam Chair, I had a quick question, and I have it teed up on my iPad. I'm wondering if you could draw me to the section. As we saw it kind of come to as an issue on the last submissions, anonymity. Is there a rule here that addresses whether people can just anonymously make complaints or have their name redacted from the complaint? Because I think that's worthy of discussion. I didn't readily see it when I went through this draft.
I will follow up with legal on that. I do know for staff, if there is ethics concerns that come up, we do have policy that have that, but also we have the whistleblower, which provides protections for staff if they were to bring up improper use in government, that they can't be adversely affected their positions. But I'll work with legal to see about the name. I don't have a definite answer right now.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Thank you, Kathleen, for getting this as beautifully organized as you have with the timeline. That's what will make it happen. And thank you for doing that. let's move to the ARPA funding process 2.3.
Sorry, this is my process week. This is the final one that you guys will have to consider today for feedback. So I did have some conversations with Mark about this as well, and I know the council's been interested in an external ARPA funding request, like a grant program for our community businesses or nonprofits. So just putting stuff out there for your feedback. There's nothing set in stone. All of this is draft. And again, for the community members who are watching, this is just my thought process on a piece of paper. I am trying to be more intentional to get this written to also for transparency. So my apologies today for not posting this on the web beforehand, but we will today. And my goal in the future is to do this in much more in advance notice. So one of the recommendations, and we do have also on here that Mark supplied of ARPA request or ARPA funding now, what we've already used, what's been committed, what's available. And so I'll go through this first, and then Mark can share, and Mark can chime in on this one as well, but we'll share the funding pieces. But maybe we're thinking about for the financial recommendations, just initially of possibly setting aside $2 million aside for this process, just to see how it goes initially. And then a $10,000 minimum request. So that way we're not receiving, $200 or $500. So there really has to be an intentional that a business had been hurt financially, continue to struggle, and be able to identify that moving forward. The committee member suggestion, so this is the group that would be reviewing the requests coming in. Laura Young in the auditor's office, she actually reviews all ARPA requests right now. She is our program expert on making sure we're in compliance with what's required by law. So having her be the staff person that's really working with this group. We'd like to have a member of community services, a member of our finance team, a counselor, a member of the business community, which could be the Chamber of Commerce or others. We have developed a great relationship with them over the last 2 years and have in years past as well. Maybe a member from education. We do have a community college here. We do also have Wazoo Vancouver, and there's other like the Charter College, and there's other K-12 if that's something the council wants to consider. Somebody who's going to represent equity. So whether this is through the NAACP, LULAC, SHARE, the deaf community, Council for the Homeless. So just somebody with that lens coming in to help review these grant proposals that would be coming in. And then any others that the council may want to include, such as healthcare, fire districts. I know Vancouver has their own fire, but most of the other jurisdictions in our area are fire districts that may not have received ARPA funding as much as cities or counties, and maybe other public safety. Draft process, again, this is just me putting out ideas, but finalizing the committee members by, I think it's the end of next week, it's February 25th, February 8th, and meaning, so reaching out based on council feedback today, reaching out to some of those partners that we could ask to be included in this process, have them actually sit down for a week. I have that February 28th, so just over a week to sit down and kind of develop evaluation criteria if needed. Obviously, we have to follow the law on what ARPA can be used for, but maybe there's other, like an RFP or a bid process. What's the criteria? Bring back that evaluation criteria to the council during the March 9th council time for your feedback and consideration. Once that's approved, hopefully that day in the afternoon, we'll get a news release out to the community and about what are we looking for? We have a grant process. Here's a process. Here's the minimum amount. Here's the criteria, and really get that information out. Have the applications be due on March 18th. The committee provide an overview and the recommendations to the council during council time on the 30th. So it gives them a little time to evaluate and have conversations if they need to. And then on April 5th, during the council time, that's when you would formally consider them for approval. And if you have questions on this one, or if you want to jump over to Mark's funding.
I do have a question / comment, if I could, Madam Chair, on what's been presented so far. So I'm a real champion of what is happening and being proposed by LULAC. and their request for a multi-year funding from ARPA funds for their own food bank, which is culturally sensitive. And as we've learned, and we just read in our Black History Month resolution last night, we've seen a lot of additional impacts because of the pandemic, because of poor health, poor diet, comorbidities of obesity and diabetes, things like that. And generally our food bank can do a lot better educational wise, but also in its selection of foods. LULAC is proposing a great program. Here's what my concern is, because I would like to see that program approved. I would like to see it replicated by other organizations, minorities, underrepresented peoples that really need to focus on food health. If they sit and you have them named on the committee, I wouldn't want them to have to recuse themselves from voting on their own application. So I want to just raise that issue, that especially if others emulate LULAC in their proposals in that one area, that we have the people that we need as stakeholders, but I don't want them put at a disadvantage when their own organizations put forward a funding request. So how would we deal with that?
One option, because I'm not anticipating asking or saying, okay, we're going to use this person from NAACP because LULAC has that, so these are just options for your consideration that would represent equity as a whole. So it's not all of the organizations. But what we could do though is when we are appointing or asking somebody to join it, we could, because if they're on the committee, they're going to have to recuse themselves. That's not a fair process. So let them know if you're going to be submitting something, you're going to have to recuse yourself. Or the other option is to say, if you're going to apply, then you can't be on the evaluation committee. And so that way, if NAACP or LULAC or SHARE or Council for the Homeless or any of those organizations, or even a fire district, if you want somebody from a fire district or Clark College, if they were going to apply for this funding, then they would not be able to be represented on the evaluation committee unless they recuse themselves.
So I think a better route for us to discuss is to allow them to simply disclose, hey, this is our proposal, but I want to talk about it. I don't think we should prevent them from voting or participating. I think it's just an issue of disclosure.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that with a public process, but I will confirm with legal, because I know with RFP processes and stuff, if there's a conflict of interest, there are some legal parameters around that, but I will double check with legal and I can respond back to you next week.
And Kathleen, if I could just add to that, and Councilor Bowerman and I, or Chair Bowerman and I, sit on the CALT Community Foundation Fund, and this topic has come up where, frankly, I have an organization that I belong to that applied for a grant, and I just said up front, look, this is an organization that I work with, and so I will not, be able to vote, so I'll recuse. What they did allow me to do was to speak on behalf of the request. So that worked well. I think that was well within the guidelines of any conflict of interest, and I didn't vote on it. So I think what you've laid out makes sense. You either recuse yourself in terms of voting, because we just can't do that, or if they don't want to do that, then they're not on the committee. But I think there's either way we can work it out. I don't think somebody should not be on the committee because they might, their organization might be applying for a grant.
And actually, Councilor Olson's viewpoint and expression about details on the organization was very helpful. So it was good that it was offered. Kind of made me wonder, in all honesty, why we don't do that for every organization's request, but that's for another day. I have some questions on the funding. The $2 million is it says initial assigned to ARPA funding. What is the total that is not claimed or assigned elsewhere of ARPA at this point?
Yes, so staff, if you could please pull up the slide that Mark sent over regarding ARPA funding. I think it's a PowerPoint slide.
Kathleen, do you want me to walk through this as part
Yeah,
of
you
the?
can start talking as they send that over.
Oh,
And if you want, staff, you can give me access and I can share my screen as well.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. I don't think I have it, but let me allow you to share here. Sorry about that.
Can you guys all see that?
Yes, thank you.
all right, Council. So this just kind of summarizes where we're at today. We did just submit our first report to the Department of Treasury on the 31st. And so these numbers are from what we have spent up to this point. The total award, 94.8 million, is what the Department of Treasury has indicated the county would receive. We've received half of that already, and we're scheduled to receive the second half in May of this year. Based on the staff reports that the council has already approved, that first column, the committed column, is what is already, it's already been set aside. It's earmarked at this point. The next column is the spent column. That's what actually has gone out the door. So you can see that we're just starting into the spending process. There has been some programs set up, but the spending, of course, it will pick up this year, next year, up until 2024, and as long as it's been committed, can go even further. So the last column is the uncommitted portion, and you'll see that it's about 55 million at this point. Now, there is a note that I wanted you to be aware of. Some of the funding that we've committed or designated as for revenue recovery, we were able to recover, and this is for prior years, of course. For 2020, we were able to recover 2.8 million. That money has been returned to the general fund in the 2021 financial statements. 2021, 2022, and 2023, as you can see in that block below, will be eligible for about 10 million each year should the council choose to approve that revenue recovery. What that does, it moves the fund, or moves the money, the cash out of the ARPA fund into the general fund, which does make it more flexible, and it can be used for any purpose at that point, including some of the proposals that are typically under the ARPA grant. It just makes it a more flexible type of funding because it could also be used for general fund as well. So any questions on how this is set up?
Yes, what is the process that you envision and the timing for committing the remainder of the funds?
It is up to the council. That is one of the things that Kathleen is doing today, is setting up a process for external requests. There has been a lot of talk of using some of this remaining balance to do the reconfiguration and repurposing of our facilities. That facilities work has already started. We've already been walking through what that would look like. We do not have a price tag on what that looks like yet, but it would be, it would be significant, some of the proposals that are currently being considered. So.
And I can also share, there was a process set up by, I believe, Laura, and working with other stakeholders for internal requests. If there's any other internal departments that have specific requests, we've asked them to submit them on a quarterly basis now. I've only heard of one that might be coming forward next month, or I think it's March and April. So those may be coming from the council as well, is if any of our departments are still seeing a struggle or a need that's based on COVID and what we've been dealing with.
Yeah, I think a lot of the departments that have already received their funding approved, they're digesting it right now, right? They're trying to work through how are we going to program this funding. So we haven't received a lot of additional requests at this point. So
yeah, and also just as Mark mentioned, with the space needs planning, once they've been doing, I was able to attend one of the meetings last week with some just preliminary options for conversation with all the departments. They're looking at a lot of efficiencies, but like Mark said, those will cost some money. So once they get a little bit further along in the process where they might have like a first real draft, I will be inviting them to council time to share that information with council as well, so that you can see what's being considered and provide input as well.
One other question, and this is probably has a simple answer. When the grant opportunity is publicized, is there already developed a simple little paragraph of explanation of what the funds can be used for?
Yes, just like with a bid process and RP process, the criteria in which they'll be evaluated on will be shared up front. So,
and is that developed already?
It will be developed by what's being proposed is the committee that will do the evaluation will develop that criteria and then bring that back to council for your review prior to sending it out.
I see.
And as Kathleen mentioned, the staff to that committee would be our program coordinator, our Arpa program coordinator, who's very well versed in what's allowed and what's not. So she would be able to guide them in putting those requirements together.
Excellent.
Madam Chair, could I make a couple of comments?
Yes, please, Counselor.
So, obviously, where the rubber meets the road, the nuts and bolts of this is really an executive function. But I think we provide important direction and how this money is spent. We need to spend it in a way that gets us the most bang for the buck, meaning, it's limited funds, it's limited in time, but it's over a few years period. So it's investment that can bring additional economic development or put in place structures that will reap greater return that we can sustain in other ways over the years. And so I want to give a couple examples. We put $15 million into addressing homeless situation, and $5 million of that was going to go to shelter space, which is critically needed. And I think to some extent, this isn't a criticism, but because it's well used. But in my mind, I was hoping that we were going to have $5 million investment in additional shelter space. That didn't happen. $5 million went to pay for existing shelter space. So I don't know if we've got opportunities out there for additional shelter space or not, or investment together with the city. But that was an area of policy direction that I think somewhat got misdirected. We have opportunities along the railroad that I hope that we can invest in that will bring economic development. We have possibility of acquiring an airport that could reap increased revenue for the county and economic development and job creation that could be benefiting from ARPA funds. I'm hoping, and I assume each of you have talked with the sheriff or sheriff's representative. The sheriff is having a hard time filling job positions, whether in corrections or deputy positions. The one-time funding could help make them whole by offering bonuses or some other means to entice good candidates to fill their ranks. We need to invest in law enforcement. Perhaps repurposing the juvenile detention facility, which is vastly underused right now, would be an expenditure of money that will bring us great benefits in the future, relocating the very few juvenile detainees that are there. doing some investment in our jail right now for temporary space, or creating a space in the juvenile facility, for instance. May take some investment in temporary funding for private corrections staff that the sheriff could manage. In any case, we need to work together with the executive branch to kind of look for those opportunities where we can put this money to good use now that is sustainable in the future. And the sheriff's office is going to be a focus of mine, and I'm hoping everyone will join in that to help fill their ranks to where it should be so we can have better public safety out there. And the jail is a big component of that, and we have some short-term opportunities there where ARPA money could be applied. Thank you.
Chair, if I can just, some of these spending options is a county policy driven by the council. And just as a reminder, anything that the council supports, the staff will certainly support working towards. But keep in mind, this is one-time funding. So whatever we use for the one-time, think about that as we're looking at the different projects. So I would not be recommending using this funding for an ongoing support or revenue source, because it will be depleted and we will no longer have the one-time funding. So,
right. Well, thank you. This is wonderful. I hope that as the program rolls out, we'll find the need for increasing that 2 million to a higher number, since there are more funds that potentially would be available for this. I hope that occurs. I think Councilor Medvigi just spent way more than 2 million in his discussion, right? So we probably need quite a bit more funds in the community, and I'm hoping that works out. We'll see if the requests come in. So thank you, Mark. I don't think we have further questions at this time. So
all right, you're welcome, Council.
We'll catch you later with more, I'm sure. Let's move to Councilor, excuse me, Councilor reports. I believe that there are just 2 of us left online at this point. Councilor Medvigi, do you have any councilor report?
I do.
Please go ahead.
Let's get it. And I see Leslie's still on. It's going to make her nervous. But it needs to be public. I'm going to request that we have another executive session soon about the redistricting issues. The public voter at the county council is not being represented on the lawsuit that's been brought. It's just sitting dormant. I haven't had any response back from the PA's office on our ability to move forward in an appropriate way with the court. So the redistricting committee itself is not getting any direction or anticipating any direction from the court on resolving some of the ambiguities that are in the charter, as well as their authority to fix whether it's voting numbers or voting impacts on moving boundaries against certain parties or individuals. So we need to make it public that we're every day that goes by and that we're not responding to this lawsuit is a day of disadvantage for our voters and for the county council. So I'm asking that we have another executive session, perhaps with the PA himself, to see how we can move forward in getting representation and to answer this lawsuit that's been filed against us.
Is that something that can be accommodated? Kathleen or Leslie?
We can certainly set an executive session on that item.
And I believe that the redistricting committee is meeting tonight. Is there legal person from the PA's office meeting with them or available to them?
Yes, they do have legal representation from the PA's office.
who will be with them tonight,
Yes.
because who knows, that may be their last meeting. I still call them the former redistricting committee because somehow or another they were reconstituted, but they may not be reconstituted again after they fulfill their mission tonight. Counselor Olson, I apologize. I had not seen you online. And I thought that maybe you had to drop off, but I see that you are still here. I don't see you visually, but do you have a report that you would like to give?
Actually, I don't have a report, but I appreciate, yeah, I'm still here, so.
Okay.
Any updates, thank you.
I'm glad you're here because I would like for you to hear my report, actually. I thought that we had a rough meeting last night as it pertained to the agenda. We had a lot of items on the agenda, 3 public hearings and a very important public hearing. And I wanted to thank each counselor individually for making that meeting happen in the way that it did. I think as we go forward in the manner like we did last night when the business is difficult, I just think that's wonderful, because my sense was that we disagreed on some items. And as you know, my mentality is I think that's a good thing when the disagreement is substantive. Our votes were not all unanimous, and that's okay too. But I just felt like it was a good meeting, and I thank you for the participation that that you individually gave to make it happen in that way. Any other counselor reports? Anything that comes to mind? Okay, how about, we've already accomplished the work session requests. How about Lindsay with a report on policy issues?
So a few things. The legislature is hard at work looking at the calendar. The House of Origin cutoff was yesterday. So House bills had to get out of the House and Senate bills out of the Senate. Of course, you know, as anybody in Olympia will tell you, no bill's really ever dead until the end of session. So it can come back. But for the most part, if it didn't get out of the House or the Senate and it's not a budget bill, it's probably dead. So some ones that have died, we talked about Senate Bill 5663. This was regarding some state uniform procedures to address the Blake cases. That one did not pass. The body cameras grant bill did not pass. We could still see that in the budget, but that one did not pass. The middle housing bill with that striking amendment that we had discussed on Monday, that one did not pass. And there's Bill 1638 that would have modified the provisions regarding fireworks prohibitions, and that one similarly did not pass. The Voting Rights Act, we discussed this a couple weeks ago, changes to the State Voting Rights Act. That one did pass, so I anticipate we'll have some discussions about that in our delegation meeting Monday. And before I forget, Monday is a holiday, but the legislature will be in session, so we will have our legislative update call at 11:30, even though it's a holiday. We are expecting the economic revenue forecast, the most updated forecast from the Forecast Council, to come out today. That'll be the last piece of information that the budget negotiators need to prepare their budgets. So we should be seeing the House and Senate budgets here maybe by the end of this week, but probably next week. One thing that we are going to see tomorrow, the governor has announced he'll have a press conference regarding the indoor mask mandates. So I don't know what he will say, but that press conference will be tomorrow. And then one last thing on the budgetary note, one of the transportation revenue bills came out. That was the Senate's 5 o'clock bill. That was their final bill that they took up yesterday. One piece that's in there that pertains particularly for Clark County is there's a proposed fuel tax on out-of-state petroleum. which primarily is Oregon, which would be about a 6 cents per gallon fuel tax that on petroleum that's exported to Oregon. Washington's the state that is the only state in the Northwest that does petroleum refinery. And so we export to our neighbors. And so obviously Oregon is not happy with learning that their residents may see a tax increase at the pump that Oregon legislature really doesn't have any control over. So there's the question of whether there would be a retaliation of some kind and how it would impact the discussions as it pertains to the I-5 bridge. So that one did pass. Senator Cleveland requested an amendment to delay that fuel tax. So it's been delayed, and if it gets to the governor's desk and is signed, would now go into effect in June of 2023. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but we will also talk more at our meeting on Monday.
Questions for Lindsay? I'm sorry to hear about the body cam funding, at least to this point. Any questions for Lindsay? Okay, thank you for your report, Lindsay, and I believe that we have no executive sessions that are scheduled today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So unless there is something for the good of the order, and is there?
I just have a question for our Lake Vancouver meeting. Are we doing a separate Zoom on that, or are we staying here?
I guess you could stay on here. That's fine. But I do have a separate meeting scheduled for it, a separate WebEx. I think it's better if you log off of this one and go on the separate one that I sent you. It's on your calendar.
Okay.
Because this is
It's
open.
always a danger you may not see me again.
We'll wait. Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.